welcome back to Encore Learning. We're here for a special preview of the National Museum of the United States Army. And from what I understand, it did open a while ago, but had to close because of the pandemic. So very few people have seen this museum. So it's kind of special that what we're going to see today. But I just want to go over a few things about how to ask a question during the webinar. You can ask questions through Q&A. Use Q&A function, not chat. Chat is disabled. So you just click on the Q&A icon, open it up, and enter your question. You can enter the question anytime during the presentation. You don't have to wait till the end. Questions are only visible to the panelists and the hosts. And you have any technical problems, just send an email to info@encorelearning.net. And just a reminder that this presentation is being recorded today, so you can see it at a future date. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Madeline, who's going to introduce our speaker, and Madeline Morgan from Encore Learning. So Madeline, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Terry, and welcome to all of our guests and Encore Learning folks who enjoy these presentations. Today, I'd like to introduce Kathleen Lugerich. She is the manager of visitor engagement and programs for the Army Historical Foundation, which honors the American soldier by preserving and presenting the history and heritage of the United States Army, and serves as the official foundation of the National Museum of the United States Army. Mrs. Lugerich has over 15 years of experience in museum public programming that includes a park ranger at the Guilford County National Military Park, an education coordinator in Baltimore with the historic ships, manager of education and interpretation for Roanoke Island Festival Park, and my favorite, the education manager for Fort Pitt Museum in my hometown of Pittsburgh. In her current role for the Army Historical Foundation, Mrs. Lugerich is responsible for developing public programs to support the National Museum of the United States Army and managing the Army Action Center that features virtual reality and simulation experience. Kathleen, that's quite a stellar resume, and we all look forward to hearing what you have to say and see the wonderful opportunities that await us.
Thank you so much for that introduction and inviting me to speak about your Army Museum. Unfortunately, the time we have together today is not nearly enough time to go through everything in the museum. In fact, it might actually take you several trips to visit the museum itself to fully experience every exhibit and additional experience we have to offer. But what I can offer is an overview of the museum that includes architectural design choices and facts about the museum, a closer look at some of the artifacts, and a few videos to show you what you can find out about the museum now and what you can expect when the museum reopens to the public on June 14th. I do want to mention that the health and safety of the museum's visitors, volunteers, and staff continue to be a top priority. The museum is aware of the CDC new mask guidelines shared on May 13th and is monitoring adjustments to the Department of the Army and the Commonwealth of Virginia's guidelines for museums. Visitors should visit the museum's website for the most current visitor information at www.thenemusa.org. So that's all the museum's initials, the NMUSA.org. The National Museum of the United States Army is a joint effort between the United States Army and the Army Historical Foundation. While it's a joint construction effort, the U.S. Army actually owns and operates the museum, and the foundation serves as the foundation for the museum, responsible for all the revenue generating projects, retail, operational, and attractions management. And so to start, I'd like to show you this introductory video about the museum.
Since 1775, the United States Army has protected our nation's freedom. For nearly 2.5 centuries, 30 million men and women have served as American soldiers. Thanks to the generosity of so many grateful Americans, the National Museum of the United States Army now stands. Constructed on a hilltop at Fort Belvoir, just south of Washington, D.C., the museum will honor our soldiers' sacrifices, remember their accomplishments, and recount the history of our nation as seen through the eyes of those who served. Every visitor will catch their first full view of the museum traveling up the scenic approach leading to the entry plaza. The museum's impressive glass and stainless steel structure reflects the strength of America's Army. Along the path leading to the museum's entrance, visitors will read personal soldier tributes and unit recognitions. Immediately, they will see that the story of the U.S. Army is a story of ordinary Americans who came together to accomplish the extraordinary. As visitors enter the museum lobby, their eyes will be immediately drawn to the massive campaign wall, providing a snapshot of the Army's entire history in one glance. A 21-foot Army emblem is inlaid in the center of the lobby's terrazzo flooring. The bright and open space is illuminated through colored glass panels representing the Army's campaign streamers. Leading visitors from the lobby are the stainless steel pylons of the Soldiers' Stories Gallery. Aligned in formation in front of the Soldiers' Creed, these pylons showcase etchings and personal stories of soldiers selected from different eras of Army history. Past the pylons, visitors reach the main concourse, where they will first see the Fighting for the Nation galleries. Running the length of the museum, these galleries will trace the chronological history of the Army in armed conflicts, from colonial times through today. Rarely and never before displayed artifacts, immersive exhibits, and detailed scenes will bring these turning points in history to life. The Founding the Nation Gallery includes Captain John Berry's saber, one of the few objects known to have been used during the defense of Baltimore in 1814. In the Global War Gallery, visitors will see at dramatic scale life-size soldiers descending a cargo net to a waiting Higgins boat, one of the famed boats that brought troops to shore on D-Day. The museum's Higgins boat is one of only 6 surviving from the landing on the beaches of Normandy. In the Vietnam exhibit, an iconic Huey helicopter is suspended from the ceiling. Every soldier who served in Vietnam will vividly remember the Huey. Americans who lived at that time will recall the images of so many flying across their television screens nightly as they watch the conflict unfold. In the Changing World Gallery, the area dedicated to the Army's most recent history, visitors will see up close the engine recovered from the Black Hawk helicopter, Super 6-1, that was shot down during the 1993 Battle of Mogadishu. Also located off the concourse is the Army and Society Gallery. Unique for a military museum, this gallery explores the relationship between the Army and the American people, and how the Army has played a key role in shaping our national character. It will tell of the Army's innovations and inventions, the role of the Army family, responses to disasters, and the creation of critical infrastructure. Another key feature of the museum is the Army Theater, an immersive, 300-degree multi-sensory experience. Through the museum's signature film, visitors will discover the Army values and what it truly means to be an American soldier. After visitors make their way back to the museum's entrance, they can pass through to the Experiential Learning Center. Here, they will have the chance to participate in hands-on interactive activities. Visitors of all ages will develop skills and have fun with geography, science, technology, engineering, and math through virtual challenges based on real-life Army missions. Moving to the museum's second floor, visitors will find the special exhibition areas. The museum will open with a collection in the Combat Art Gallery entitled The Art of Soldiering. The pieces will visually depict the experiences of the American soldier from the Civil War to the present through art produced on the front lines. Visitors will also have the chance to view an unprecedented collection of Japanese-American artifacts in the special exhibit space. The chosen pieces will tell of the courage and struggles of Japanese-American Nisei soldiers at home and abroad during World War II. On the museum's third floor, visitors may attend celebrations and ceremonies in the Veterans Hall. This multifunctional space has full AV capabilities and is the largest of the museum's spaces available for public and private events. Adjacent to the Veterans Hall is the Medal of Honor Experience, which invites visitors to learn about the nation's highest award for valor. The experience includes an outdoor rooftop garden overlooking the entire museum campus. The garden is designed in tribute to the Army's Medal of Honor recipients, whose names are permanently etched in granite along the south wall. Throughout a visitor's time at the museum, they will have the opportunity to shop at the museum store, enjoy refreshments at the museum's cafe, and enhance their visit by stepping inside the simulators in the Army Action Center. COVID-19 precautions may change the initial visitor's experience, but the museum will always stand as the finest tribute ever built to the American soldier.
I still get chills every time I watch that video. But that gives you a great introduction to the museum itself, its mission, and some of the artifacts and exhibits you'll see inside. But one thing I want to note that's very important, you do not need a government ID in order to access the property. While it is in Fort Belvoir, it's not on the base and is located right off the Fairfax County Parkway between Routes 1 and I-95. However, you will need to reserve a time ticket to get into the museum building itself, which you can do on the museum's website. Now, a few things I want to add about the exterior and architectural design elements about the museum, as we get a lot of questions about these. The exterior of the museum is made of 1 million pounds of 8-inch thick rain screen insulated panels of stainless steel and minimum glazing that allows reflections to be cast on the facade, transforming the building at every point of the day during each season of the year. Also, I want to give credit to these amazing photographs I'm about to share with you, as the majority of these were taken by either Duane Lempke or Scott Metzler. And this is a view of the lobby ceiling. You saw an explanation in the video of the lobby itself that displays the campaign wall and Army emblem. But the ceiling has a series of translucent laminated glass panels that match those campaign streamers. So if you've ever wondered what the ribbons are on someone's uniform, now you can learn what they are. In fact, many of our volunteers like to point out the ceiling, as many of them are Army veterans themselves who love to share the Army story and their own to help give visitors a human face to the service. As you walk into the main exhibit concourse, you'll see those 41 stainless steel pylons. But another thing to note is how the museum building marks transitions between different spaces. Glass thresholds with wood fins are used to signal transitions between the unique spaces in the museum. Each wood fin is made of American white oak and ash and is embedded with LED strips that line up with the striped wood flooring. So each time you walk through one of these wooden transitions, you're walking into a new section of the museum. So the next thing I'm going to show you is a video of one of our colleagues walking through the beginning of the Soldier Story Gallery that leads to the main exhibit. Now, I do want to point out this video does not have sound. So as you can see, these pylons each have an image of a soldier, as well as biographical information, the dates they served, and also their date of birth and or death, and any special awards they may have received. And you'll notice there's also a wide variety of soldiers based on ethnic diversity, and these were chosen for that reason, to show that America's Army is as diverse as the country itself. And we will be coming up on it soon, but on the back wall is projected the American Soldier Creed. I am an American soldier. And on the back rows of these final pylons, the back sides are actually electronic, so we can show more soldier stories. So as you walk through this exhibit gallery, you'll want to turn around and face some of the last ones to see those extra stories that we couldn't just fit on 41 pylons. But as that video showed, millions of soldiers have served in the Army. So there's so many stories to tell and share. So if you noticed in that walkthrough, on the left-hand side, there was a wall with words and the American flag. This is the display of the Army's core values: loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. To learn more about these values and be introduced to the museum and Army life, just on the right-hand side of those pylons was the Army Theater that shows the film Of Noble Deeds. I like this movie because it has the Army's drill team in it. And I always love watching the drill team. But Of Noble Deeds explores what it means to truly be an American soldier. It includes footage of soldiers and current Army operations, along with recreations of some of the Army's most significant battles. The theater's 300-degree screen and external sensory elements make the viewer have sight, sound, and movement to make you feel like you were really there. The movie is shown multiple times every hour, and it doesn't require a ticket. And there is one showing every hour presented with limited sensory elements and closed captioning. And just for a little insider's tip, since there is no ticket required, it's first come, first serve. So if you know you want to go to the theater and you want to see Of Noble Deeds, I would suggest lining up at least 15 minutes before showtime to guarantee you have a seat. And in addition to Of Noble Deeds, each exhibit gallery also has Each exhibit gallery also has brief videos related to Army life and that historic time period. So now we're going to go a little deeper into the permanent exhibit galleries and over 1,300 artifacts on display. First is the Founding the Nation Gallery that covers the Army's history from the colonial period through the War of 1812. It explores the origins and formation of the Continental Army, its role in the Revolutionary War, and the Army's development as a professional force. It also covers key events of the War of 1812, including the Battle of Chippewa, the burning of Washington, the assault on Fort McHenry, and the Battle of New Orleans. Here we see the entrance into the exhibit gallery, and this wooden box is actually a small movie theater. The outside displays the building blocks, that's why it's built that way, to show the building blocks of the US Army, literally things you need to have an army: food, weapons, blankets, clothes. And as you walk around the building, you can see, we learn about the major engagements of the armies involved in. The years are lit up on the floor, and the exhibits all correspond to a focus on a specific battle or a building block of the Army, like medical needs, feeding and supplying soldiers. And you'll see similar themes of exhibits throughout the entire museum so that you can connect them all as you move through time. Now, what I love about this exhibit is that it actually begins before the American Revolution. At my previous position, I worked at the Fort Pitt Museum, which focuses mostly on the French and Indian War on the frontier and westward expansion. And we had a lot of these. We had a lot of powder horns. Powder horns are cow horns, and they were used to carry gunpowder. The horns kept the powder dry, and the horns themselves were spark-proof, so the powder couldn't accidentally catch fire. They were common for frontiersmen and riflemen. Soldiers, on the other hand, carried cartridge boxes with pre-made cartridges that were paper tubes filled with gunpowder and shot ready to be loaded. So while the rifles had the advantage of range and accuracy, it still took a little longer to fire. In fact, it took about 30 to 45 seconds to load a rifle, as opposed to the 15 to 20 seconds it could take to fire a musket. So back in the French and Indian War, musket would kind of be considered rapid fire. However, powder horns are also decorative art and a record of someone's stories. Many display forts, rivers, mountains, names. So it's not only a form of folk art, one of the first in America, but it's also an early record of colonial life and a record of someone's life who might otherwise not have known existed. And if I remember correctly, there are 3 or 4 powder horns on display in the National Museum of the United States Army. And this one dates back to 1758, which, by the way, is when Pittsburgh was founded at the confluence of the rivers by General John Forbes. I won't go too much into Pittsburgh trivia, I promise, that's probably it. But it's interesting to know that the Army's story doesn't start in 1775. It starts much earlier, when regular people learned how to stand up and defend their homes and country, things that planted the seeds for what would eventually become the US Army. The next exhibit is Preserving the Nation, which gives an understanding of the Army's part in the Civil War. It also documents the Army's role in westward expansion, the Lewis and Clark expedition, the Indian Wars, and the Mexican War. Now, instead of walking you through this exhibit, I thought it would be fun to show a program that was done by the museum's Program and Education Department on what a Civil War soldier wears, which is part of a program the museum hopes to offer in the future on site and in person.
Hello, my name is Tony, and I'm an educator here at the National Museum of the United States Army. Today I'm here to talk to you about the Civil War soldier's load, or the weapons, uniform, and equipment that Civil War soldiers wore during battle. First, we'll take a look at my uniform. This is the typical uniform a Civil War soldier would have worn during the war. My uniform is mostly made of wool and has 4 main pieces: my forage cap, sack coat, sky blue trousers, and brogan boots. Along with my uniform, I also carried a variety of other objects, including my weapon, which was a rifled musket, my food and many personal items, which I carried in my haversack, as well as my knapsack, which I took with me on marches, which carried my blanket, spare clothing, and my shelter. As you can see, the Civil War soldier carried a variety of items and needed to be well equipped to face the harsh conditions they faced on and off the battlefield.
As you can tell, the education department is very excited to keep doing these programs. In fact, one of them walked by wearing a World War II helmet. So I'm sure a World War II episode is coming soon. But currently, the Soldier's Load program is only offered virtually, and you can sign up for those for free on the museum's website. But when you visit the museum, you can compare soldiers' loads, innovations, battles, and tactics by using different interactive kiosks in each exhibit. So while in the Civil War gallery, you can compare Civil War tactics with World War II tactics and how they changed. Now, I've shown you a lot of different things. By the way, this video does not have sound for a reason, so I could speak. I've shown you a lot of things that visitors can interact with. And this is in the Army Concourse, and it's focused on Army innovations and its relationship to US history, because we believe that and try to explain and show and describe that Army history is US history. But these screens are fun because you can look at objects up close, move them around, zoom in, and learn a little bit about them and share them with others at the table. But when you enter the museum, you're offered a stylus so you can interact with these screens and share. It's branded with the museum's website, so you don't forget who we are. And you can use them throughout the exhibits to interact with these screens and other handheld items. But back to the exhibits on display. One artifact in the Preserving the Nation is a fragment of the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry Regiment flag, which was carried in the July 18, 1863 attack on Fort Wagner in South Carolina. Sergeant William H. Kearney retrieved the flag from the fallen flag bearer and continued the charge. He returned from the attack shouting, "The old flag never touched the ground." Sergeant Kearney was awarded the Medal of Honor for his bravery and is the first African American to receive the Medal of Honor. Out of almost 3,500 Medal of Honor recipients in US history, only 88 have been African American. Kearney was born into slavery in Norfolk, Virginia in 1840, and his family was eventually granted freedom and he moved to Massachusetts. Kearney wanted to pursue a career in the church, but when the Civil War started, he felt that the best way to serve God was to serve the military to help free the oppressed. In March 1863, he joined the Union Army and was attached to the 54th Massachusetts. During the action at Fort Wagner, he caught the flag from the dying flag bearer, And despite several gunshot wounds, he carried the flag and continued to lead the men in his regiment forward. When they reached the fort, he planted it in the sand and held it upright until he was rescued. He was promoted to the rank of sergeant for his actions and for his bravery awarded the Medal of Honor. But that wasn't until 37 years later, on May 23rd, 1900. Sergeant Carney's name is displayed on the third floor of the museum in the Medal of Honor wall, and his story is actually displayed in the garden itself so you can learn more about him. And while the 54th Massachusetts was disbanded after the Civil War, it was reactivated in 2009 and serves as a National Guard ceremonial unit for honorary funerals and state functions. Also in this exhibit is a vignette of a 12-pounder Napoleon gun. The gun was first developed by the French in 1853 and later adopted by the US artillery. It was dubbed the Napoleon after the French Emperor Napoleon III, who guided its development. The first American Napoleon was cast in December 1856 in Massachusetts. The last ones were cast in 1864, but some remained in service until the 1880s. The 12-pounder was the last bronze gun adopted by the Army, and it began to shift to iron-rifled cannons. The model 1857 Napoleon was the most commonly referred to as the 12-pounder, which is the weight of the solid shot it fired. Solid shot was best used for breaking walls and obstructions and were effective from 600 to about 2,000 yards. There were other shots that cannon like this could fire, including canister shot that looked like a tin can that held metal fragments or shrapnel inside and used against masses of troops, and shell that were hollowed out solid shots filled with black powder and used to penetrate earthworks and wooden buildings. This cannon is made of bronze and the tube itself weighs 1,200 pounds. Carriage weighs about 1,100 pounds, and typically it would take 6 horses to haul. The bore of the cannon is 4.62 inches in diameter, and it would require about a 2.5-pound charge to fire. This particular cannon is also supposedly to have been at the Battle of Gettysburg, which, interesting story related to Gettysburg just a few years ago. Back in 2014, Lieutenant Colonel Alonzo Cushing of the 4th U.S. Artillery was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. It's 151 years after his actions at Pickett's Charge. He was in charge of an artillery battery of 6 cannons and 110 men, and while severely injured, he refused to leave his post and died in the ensuing charge. But there are also several other Battle of Gettysburg artifacts in this exhibit that you can see, including a solid shot, a canister shot, a vent cleaner, a New York belt and belt plate, a Confederate cartridge box, and a US model 1855 rifled musket. Now, in addition to the artifacts from the Army's collection, the exhibit and entire museum is made up of small vignettes or recreated scenes from Army history that include 70 life cast figures. Most of the life casting was done in New York, and they are composites of plastic, urethane, foam, and other materials. The figures are authentically clothed and outfitted, and the models for the casts are active duty American soldiers. Soldiers were used instead of the models because soldiers know how to carry themselves. They know how to carry and hold their weapons. They know how to convey the appropriate emotions. And some of them also added suggestions as to what would make their life cast more realistic. This is Army Reservist Lieutenant Colonel Ashley Hartwell. She's the model of the female life cast corporal on patrol, which is in the Changing World Gallery. Hartwell is a reservist and former intermediate level education instructor at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College at Fort Belvoir. She first enlisted in the Massachusetts National Guard and a year later signed up for the Reserve Officers Training Corps. She then served on active duty for 10 years before moving to the Hawaii Guard and later to the Army Reserve. She served 2 tours in Iraq and worked closely with the local population and Iraqi military as part of transition teams. The life cast not only displays Army, soldier, and U.S. history, but also highlights the growing role of women in combat during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. In fact, there have been several changes in the armed forces that have created more opportunities for women soldiers. And some of the most recent ones include removing the ban on women serving in combat arms, changes to the combat uniform designed to fit both genders, and the Army's release of an improved tactical vest designed to support the female form. In Lieutenant Hartwell's interview regarding her life cast experience, by the way, a process which takes a lot of hours, she stated that she's seen women taken more seriously and treated more professionally now and have greater opportunities than they did before. She said that when people look at her figure, she hopes that they will see the determination of females in combat. She said, quote, "Seeing the figure of myself is truly humbling. Hopefully, other women can see themselves in her as well." Following the Preserving the Nation gallery is Nation Overseas, which explores the Army's first venture onto the world stage with operations in China and the Spanish-American War. But the majority of the exhibit focuses on the Army's role in World War I and the changing face of warfare. If you haven't noticed by now, all of the exhibits have their own color scheme and design. The Revolutionary War is red, Civil War is blue, World War I is green. This provides the visitor a clear break between time periods, and it prepares them for a brand new exhibit experience. So this exact exhibit, a little biased, it's one of my favorites because it feels like you're walking through the trenches. So up next is going to be a short video of one of my colleagues walking through the beginning of the exhibit. And this one does have sound on it. It's just very light. And then we're following another video with one of the best parts of this exhibit, the World War I immersion, where you actually walk out as if you're on top of the trenches. Another reason this exhibit is one of my favorites is this wall. It's pictures and postcards written by soldiers serving overseas. And some of them you can actually go up to and flip them over to read what they wrote their families. And again, you're handed branded styluses so you can touch these without touching them. But there's also staff constantly cleaning throughout the day in high touch areas. And there's hand sanitizer stations located throughout the museum. Other key artifacts in this exhibit, some of which you saw as we were walking around, were the Hello Girls. There is a uniform and a small display dedicated to them. They were female telephone operators serving with the American Expeditionary Forces in 1918. Approximately 200 female telephone operators ultimately served in Paris, and other locations throughout England and France. However, their veteran status wasn't recognized or awarded until 1978. And the uniforms and helmets belonging to the three Myers brothers, which we walked by through the trench, belonging to George, Frank, and Paul. These were donated by a member of the family, and uniforms show visitors that it wasn't uncommon for multiple family members to serve in the military during World War I due to the draft. The next war is probably one of the most visited and most talked about and most popular among the visitors who were able to come in November. It's the Global War Gallery. It portrays the Army's role in the Allied victory during World War II. It covers both the European and Pacific theaters, the technology of the conflict, the Army's air war, and the development of the atomic bomb. And as soon as you enter the exhibit, there are several macro, or in other words, very big artifacts that you run into. The M4 Sherman Cobra tank, Cobra King, is a 38-ton tank from the Battle of the Bulge that was the first to relieve the besieged defenders of Bastogne, Belgium. And it served with General George Patton's Third Army. Cobra King had a V8 500 horsepower gasoline engine, a 75mm main gun, and 2 machine guns. It was also an experimental tank in the fact that it was better armored and more armed than previous Sherman tanks. Following Bastogne, it took part in a raid to try to rescue POWs from a prison camp, but it was hit by a round that penetrated its armor and caused a fire and forced the crew inside to evacuate. After the war, it was recovered and displayed as a gate guard at several US bases in Germany. And as the years passed, historians and officers began investigating the stories of various tanks on display in Europe. And it was an Army chaplain whose research led him to suspect that this was the Cobra King, first in Bastogne. He was right, and the tank was shipped back to the US in 2009, and the exterior was restored, and now it's made its home at the National Museum of the US Army. And a landing craft vehicle personnel, also known as a Higgins boat, that took part in the Normandy beach landings. These boats took their name from Andrew Higgins, who was a Louisiana boat builder who designed the plywood-sided boats that could carry 36 men or 1 Jeep and 12 men. The boats could slide onto landing, lower the front ramp, discharge cargo and troops, and quickly turn around in the surf to go pick up another load. The Higgins boat is so big that it and Cobra King were put in the museum in 2017, and the building was built around it. So it was placed in the spot where they were supposed to be, and everything built around it. In total, the museum has 19 total macro or very big artifacts that include the Huey helicopter and a Bradley armored personnel carrier. And then there are some of the smaller artifacts, like the powder horn or this. One of the most popular stories amongst the museum's volunteers is that of Private Martin Teehan. In fact, my colleague and I in the foundation are doing a project called Volunteer Stories from Home that allows the volunteers from the museum to tell their favorite museum stories and their own stories that connect them to the Army. And at least half of them all say that this is their favorite artifact or one of their favorite things to point out to visitors. It's an M1 Garand rifle that belonged to Private Teehan. He was from New York City and a paratrooper with the 508 Parachute Infantry Regiment that jumped into France on D-Day. During the fighting, he was captured, shot, and killed, and he's buried in the Normandy American Cemetery and Memorial in France. His rifle was found by a French farmer just south of the drop zone, and it's not clear when it was found, but in 2016, the French Army informed the US Army that the rifle had been discovered, and the Army's chief of staff at the time went to France with members of Teehan's family to receive it, and it was donated to the museum. And what makes the rifle interesting is that on one side of the wooden stock has his name, M. Teehan, and the other side has the name Kitty. And no one knows who Kitty is or was or who or what she may have meant to Private Teehan. But now she's part of the Army's story and part of the history and part of our museum forever. After the World War II exhibit, there is the Cold War Gallery that recounts the numerous global challenges from 1945 to 1991, including major conflicts such as the Korean and Vietnam Wars. One artifact in this exhibit is the North Vietnamese prisoner of war pajamas worn by Sergeant John R. Kaviani. Kaviani was born in England in 1943 and settled in California with his mother in the 1950s. After becoming a naturalized US citizen in 1969, he enlisted in the US Army and was sent to Vietnam. In 1971, he was a staff sergeant serving in the platoon tasked with protecting a remote hilltop located in enemy territory called Hickory Hill. On the morning of June 4th, the camp was attacked by North Vietnamese soldiers. Acting with disregard to his own safety, Kaviani exposed himself to enemy fire, first in order to remove about the camp to direct the platoon's defenses. During the evacuation, he volunteered to stay on the ground to help direct the helicopters. The next day, he ordered the remaining platoon members to escape while he provided cover fire. He recovered a machine gun, stood up, and exposed himself to all heavy enemy fire, from which he received over 100 shrapnel and bullet wounds. When the North Vietnamese took the hill, he played dead and hid in the jungle for almost 2 weeks until he was captured. He spent the next 2 years in different camps and was released in 1973. He was awarded the Medal of Honor, the Bronze Star, and the Purple Heart for his actions on Hickory Hill. He retired from the Army in 1990, and he is currently buried in Arlington National Cemetery. Another feature to the Cold War Gallery is located in the Korean War section, which is a diorama of a mobile Army surgical hospital, or MASH. MASH units evolved from World War II hospital system developed for jungle fighting and amphibious operations. The first MASH units arrived in Korea in July 1950, providing support close to the fighting in the Pusan perimeter. At one point, the 8076 MASH admitted 608 patients in a single 24-hour period. And the staff of the 8055th MASH, which, by the way, was the model for the 4077th from the movie and the television show, they routinely worked 12-hour shifts, receiving and treating casualties. And the evacuation of seriously wounded troops were significantly improved by the addition of helicopter detachments. What's interesting about these MASH units is that they are part of the Army's medical advancements that went on to influence civilian life, like treatments and transportation. And as you walk through the exhibits, you can literally see how those change over time. Just how I said in the first exhibit, you'll see all those building blocks. Well, these building blocks continue so that you can see those changes. The Changing World Gallery chronicles one of the most dynamic and global periods in US history, from the fall of the Soviet Union through our most current conflict, the global war on terror. The global war on terror portion follows the progression of the operations in both Afghanistan and Iraq. The overall theme of the exhibit recognizes is that while the last 2 decades have been a near time of constant conflict, it is the individual soldier that must endure the challenges of war in an ever-changing environment. Artifacts in this portion of the exhibit include the engine from the first UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter shot down in Somalia, which is Black Hawk Down, more popularly known. A combat action badge that was authorized in 2005 to honor those who engaged the enemy during combat operations, but were not medics or infantrymen. And several items belonging to the 9/11 attacks, including melted coins, different belongings, and an aircraft landing gear from a plane that struck the World Trade Center. The final permanent exhibit is the Army and Society Gallery that examines the relationship between the Army and the American people. Key artifacts include a Wright Flyer and radar set. These illustrate the Army's contribution in driving the development of critical technologies that we use every day. That really illustrates Army history is US history. And not only does this exhibit focus on the stories of soldiers and how Army innovation drove US history, but also the stories of civilians and how they're connected with the Army and how they support the Army through organizations like the USO or just simple letter writing and sending care packages. The next area I'd like to show you is a special exhibition gallery, which currently is hosting the Art of Soldiering. But instead of me showing you a few images like I have previously, I'd like to show you a program from the museum's Curators Quarter program. This features the Chief of Exhibits, Paul Mirando. Now to do that, I'm going to change screens. So bear with me as I'm just going to change the display from this to this, and then we will go ahead and play this for you.
Greetings and welcome to a special edition of Curator's Corner here at the National Army Museum. Today I'm standing in the Art of Soldiering Gallery, where artists interpret the daily lives of soldiers, from oil paintings to wood carvings to trench art. The pieces on display are extremely powerful that connect with our visitors. And this year we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Gulf War. And I want to highlight a few pieces from that time period. So follow me inside. So the first piece I want to talk about is a watercolor done by Sergeant First Class Seeger Harkers. Harkers joined the Army in 1972 and was requested to document Operation Desert Shield. So in this painting we see a soldier with the 13th Quartermaster Battalion. Now quartermasters were responsible for food, supply, logistics, and of course laundry. And what the artist really loved about this scene was the light that's coming through the back of the tent. It reminded him of stained glass windows, like light coming through stained glass windows in a church. And for me, I think this is a great example of an artist finding beauty in the daily routine of a soldier. Let's take a look at another piece, this time done by Sergeant First Class Peter Verasano. He has the distinction of being the Army's first artist in residence. And in this ink on paper, titled MREs and a Cot, shows a soldier from the 101st Airborne Division eating an MRE. And, for me, I think this will resonate with a lot of Gulf War veterans who relied on MREs in the field. And once again, it's another depiction of the quiet side of the Army. And if you walk through this gallery, you'll see moments of contemplation in the themes that are discussed in this gallery. I want to thank you for joining us for another edition of Curator's Corner. And for more information about the artwork in this gallery, more information about the museum, please visit our website.
All right, so now I'm going to take a moment to switch back the screens to what it was originally so that we can continue on with the presentation slides. There we are. So you can see more of those Curator's Corners online. There's actually a lot. So you can learn a lot just by looking at those videos. So I highly recommend those. They're all on YouTube. Now, another temporary exhibit is dedicated to the Nisei Soldier experience that showcases an unprecedented collection of Japanese American artifacts that capture the rarely told story of the Japanese American Nisei soldiers during World War II. The exhibit highlights their struggles at home and abroad, their courageous acts on the battlefield, and their long-awaited recognition, culminating in the Congressional Gold Medal to recognize their service and sacrifice. For those of you who don't know, Nisei is the term for children of Japanese immigrants and is generally applied to American-born U.S. citizen children of Japanese immigrants who arrived prior to the Immigration Act of 1924. During World War II, the majority of Nisei were children or young adults, and Nisei soldiers served in the 100th Infantry Battalion, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and Military Intelligence Service. The 442nd was actually the most decorated unit in the entire U.S. military history. Overall, these soldiers earned 9,486 Purple Hearts, 21 Medals of Honor, and 7 Presidential Unit citations. And one object is display is a travel bag owned by Sergeant Ishida. He was born in Hawaii and inducted into the U.S. Army at the Schofield Barracks just 6 months before the attack on Pearl Harbor. He served with the 100th Infantry Battalion, and he kept an illustrated record of his experiences on his bag. Although he was injured in 1943, he served until he was discharged in 1945. And if you look closely at this bag, you can see all the places he had been while he was a soldier. You can see there's not only names, but there's small pictures, including one of a camel, a signpost, a sea ration, small town. So it's a very illustrative piece of artifact of history that we can learn from. Also on display is the Congressional Gold Medal, recognizing the Nisei soldiers. The Congressional Gold Medal is the highest civilian award bestowed by the U.S. Congress. It is awarded to persons or groups whose achievements have impacted American history and culture. George Washington was the first recipient of this medal in 1776, and since the American Revolution, there have been only 158 recipients, including the Wright brothers, Thomas Edison, the Navajo Code Talkers, and Martin Luther King Jr. The bill to award the medal to the 100th Infantry Battalion, 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and Military Intelligence Service was unanimously passed by Congress in August 2010. The ceremonial signing by President Barack Obama occurred in October in the presence of 6 Nisei veterans, and it was followed by a ceremony to award the medal in November that included a wreath presentation at the National World War II Memorial, a memorial service at the National Japanese American World War II Memorial, and a belated Bronze Star ceremony for 40 veterans. There were 3 representative Nisei veterans who accepted the medal, and these veterans and their families had once been classified as enemies by the government, and now they were being declared true heroes and patriots 60 years after their service. And this is just one example of the many impactful stories you can learn about at the museum that just make us who we are today. Final exhibition area, and this is on the 3rd floor near the Nisei exhibit, is the Medal of Honor experience and garden that explains the process of award recommendation and the hierarchy of Army awards that recognize heroic action. The garden provides an overlook of the museum campus, and the name of every single U.S. Army soldier to have ever received the Medal of Honor is engraved in the wall. The Medal of Honor is the nation's highest medal for valor in combat and can be awarded to members of the armed forces, first authorized in 1861. The recommendation process for the Medal of Honor can take more than 18 months, and for U.S. Army soldiers, it starts first with a recommendation and is submitted through the chain of command, and then it's brought to Congress. And then after Congress, it's sent to the Department of the Army, and then the Secretary of Defense, who then finally submits it to the President, who either approves it or disapproves it. And the President is the one who presents it personally to the recipient. I've already mentioned Sergeant Carney, but another story is of the only woman to have ever received the Medal of Honor, Dr. Mary Walker. Mary Walker was born in New York to abolitionist parents who encouraged her to pursue an education. So she graduated from Syracuse Medical College in 1855. She had a private practice, but when the Civil War broke out in 1861, she wanted to join the Army as a surgeon, but she wasn't allowed because she was a woman. And because of her experience, she didn't want to be a nurse, so she volunteered at the temporary hospital set up at the U.S. Patent Office in Washington, D.C. She also organized the Women's Relief Organization to help families of the wounded. In 1862, she moved to Virginia to treat the wounded at field hospitals throughout the state. And in 1863, her experience was recognized and she moved to Tennessee, where she was appointed as a War Department surgeon. In April 1864, she was captured along with several other Union doctors and held prisoner for 4 months. There's actually some speculation that she may have been a spy, but I haven't seen or read, or there hasn't been a lot of evidence about that part. But shortly after, she was assigned to be the medical director for a hospital of women prisoners in Kentucky after her prisoner exchange. Aside from her wartime efforts, she was an advocate for women's rights and even wore men's clothing. In fact, it got her arrested several occasions for impersonating a man. And in November 1865, she left the government service and was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Andrew Johnson under the recommendations of Major Generals Sherman and Thomas. And in 1917, her medal was rescinded because she never directly engaged in combat and she was never actually commissioned as an officer. She refused to return the medal and wore it until she died 2 years later. But then in 1977, thanks to the efforts of her family, her descendants, President Jimmy Carter restored the honor in her name. So now that we've covered all of the exhibits, very briefly, because there's so much to see in this museum, next we'll look at some of the immersive educational experiences you can enjoy that are a little more hands-on, a little more involved. So the Experiential Learning Center, which is located on the very first floor when you walk in, it offers a unique and immersive learning space where you can develop skills and have fun with geography, science, technology, engineering, and math, or GSTEM. It creates simulated real-world Army scenarios that connect to Army history and innovations and U.S. history. The assembly area introduces visitors to members of the diverse Army family and an overview of what it takes to keep the Army running. Interactive videos and games connect visitors with the individuals and families that make up the Army, as well as the innovations and logistics needed to maintain a U.S. military service. So all these little screens in here, you can watch some of the people who have grown up as an Army brat and joined the Army, traveled around with the Army and their family, what it meant to them. There's also a game where you can try to figure out what the most popular answers were, almost like Family Feud. And then there's also a lot of videos about what it takes to feed the Army, clothe the Army, transport the Army. There's a great video about how many pancakes they have to make at West Point every morning for all the cadets. Next is the training center, which is open to anybody during regular operating hours. It's where visitors can simulate the work done by Army soldiers in the field of 5 different areas, all related to GSTEM. At the geography station, excuse me, at the geography station, visitors utilize satellite imagery, maps, and information overlays to find specific locations. At the science station, which resembles a medical tent, visitors diagnose patients and fight diseases using simulated medical tools and scientific reasoning. By the way, the science one is the hardest. That large flat table in the middle of that picture, that is the hardest activity in the entire thing, because it actually tests to see if you remember the specific names of bones and muscles in the body. At the technology station, visitors operate a UAV to be the eyes in the sky, helping those on the ground do their job by utilizing different types of radar. At the engineering station, you build and repair bridges to help keep people and supplies moving across waterways. And if you don't build your bridge right, the whole floor moves because you destroy the bridge. It's kind of fun. And finally, at the math station, visitors determine how to accurately drop cargo from a Chinook helicopter that comes complete with the feel of being inside a real one, with wind, floor vibrations, everything. And each station allows you to choose from beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels. And it can be easily reset for the next group of visitors, or if you're like me, you want to do better. So you start the whole thing again so you can find things a little quicker and get a better score. And I do want to point out that if you start here in the ELC, it'll begin your stepped learning experience. Everything in the museum, as you've seen with those building blocks, leads to something else, shows you how the museum evolves, shows you how the Army evolves. Well, if you start in the ELC, everything in there, that's what you're going to see in the exhibits. So this is great for families, people who just want to learn. This is great for everybody. There's something for everyone at this museum. So these videos don't have sound. This is in our Army Action Center. The Army Action Center is where you can experience the museum's cutting-edge virtual reality and simulator experiences that transport you into Army experiences through virtual reality, motion platforms, state-of-the-art systems. And while these look enjoyable and fun, they were actually designed because it tells our mission, telling soldier experiences. Right now they're crossing a river in a tank. But it's telling that mission of a soldier experience and can be connected to one or more of the exhibits. Tank Commander shown so Tank Commander is part of that World War II experience with the Sherman tank. And since I am running out of time, I'm going to quickly go through the rest of these slides. But right now, as you can see, they're looking around, they can see all around them, and they're using that goggle to actually aim their own 75mm gun to aim at different targets. The next one is bunker holdout. This puts you in a simulated reality to target robotic targets. So robot dogs, robot people, different targets that you can practice defending a bunker. So this would mostly relate to the Changing World Gallery. And then finally, this is the Army Action Pod that goes through 110 years of human aviation evolution. Now, why air evolution? Why air? Why planes? Reason is, Army was the first military service to contract with the Wright brothers in 1908 to build heavier than air flying machines after the Wright brothers' first successful flights in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. So you'll start in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, and through this motion movie theater, you'll go all the way, tracing all the aviation changes and evolutions all the way to a modern aircraft carrier. Now there is one more video I want to show you. I want to thank you for your time today. On average, we expect visitors to spend anywhere from 3 to 4 hours a visit at the museum. And this one session isn't nearly enough time to tell you everything that waits for you. I mean, there's over 245 years of U.S. Army history. And I even ran out of time trying to give you this brief overview. But now I'd like to show you this very brief video of how the museum evolved and how it was constructed.
All right. The first ones have to do with the whole concept of the museum. Are you familiar with how it was conceived and why it ended up here in Virginia?
I do know a bit. Actually, the concept for an Army museum started in 1814 to recognize and remember all the soldiers who helped make America. As for how it ended up in Virginia, there were actually several proposals at the time. The foundation was actually started in 1983 for the purpose of creating this national museum. And I believe it was in, I'm not an expert in the foundation's history, late 90s maybe, that there were several proposals put out for different locations, one being Fort Belvoir, Virginia, one being down near the Navy Yard in DC, and the third location up in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where they actually built a separate Army museum. And after the proposals and presentations to the Army, they decided that Fort Belvoir would be the best location because it wasn't that far from DC. It could provide tourism to Fairfax County, Northern Virginia, bring some of those people from DC down into Virginia, because there's so many things to see here in Fairfax. I mean, I just moved here a year ago and I still haven't seen everything. But those are some of the reasons that Fairfax County and Fort Belvoir were selected.
All right, moving forward, can you share with everyone what the museum is doing specifically related to children? And is there a recommended age for that all of you recommend to bring a child there?
Well, currently, because we're still operating under COVID protocols, there's no plans to create children's learning, children's programming, like summer camps and things like that just yet. However, everyone is thinking about it. As for ages to bring to the museum, there is a younger visitors area called Fort Discover, but it is currently going to stay off limits until we know more about how we will operate in this post-pandemic with vaccines world. So as we watch what the Commonwealth of Virginia and the Department of the Army guide us to do, we can't open that area yet. However, everyone is welcome at the museum, and there's still plenty of interactive things to do for any age.
And can you talk about the tours available, how the parking is, and how many guests can you accommodate on a given day?
So parking is free. There's a large parking lot that is right next to the building off Fairfax County Parkway. There are spaces for there's multiple spaces for those who need a little more, who have accessibility needs. There's also some electric car spaces as well, or fuel efficient spaces. There we go. That's the word I need to use. And as for visiting the museum, currently you can reserve 5 tickets for general admission at a time. If you're interested in bringing groups of 10 or more, you can actually go to armyhistory.org, where you can fill out a group interest form for large groups. So if you're bringing a large tour group or a reunion group or a family group, you can go that way as well. And I'm sorry, what was the third part of that question?
The third part had to do with tours.
Tours. So I answered part of that. Right now, we're not offering organized tours, but we do have volunteer museum docents that are stationed at each exhibit who can help answer any questions you have. And the volunteers are great. If you ask them to show you some things, they might give you a mini tour themselves, just because they're just so excited for this museum to be back open. A lot of them didn't get the chance to be here when it was open in November. So they're super excited and will just take anyone.
Are there special events associated with the opening, or did that all happen last year?
It all happened last year. So when we opened on Veterans Day, we did a virtual ceremony, and that can be found online.
Okay. And talk about donations. You were mentioning about some uniforms that were donated. Or is there an opportunity for people to donate artifacts? And if so, would that be on the website?
There is an inquiry form on the website on www.thenamusa.org. I believe it's under donations or how to get involved.
And does the museum have any arrangements with other museums to share materials to take in different displays? And what percentage of the whole museum collection is on display at any one time?
Oh, that I actually cannot answer. That would have to be reserved for the.
Okay.
I do know that the Congressional Gold Medal from the Nisei exhibit is actually on loan from the Smithsonian.
All right. This question has to do more with life in the service rather than the museum specifically. As you know, that during the Carter administration, the draft was eliminated. When we had a draft, our soldiers came from all areas of the United States and were exposed to all other people and all other diversities. Has that impacted any of the soldiering, any of the interaction between the various servicemen, since we no longer have the wide array of folks coming via the draft?
I'm sorry, I actually cannot answer that question. I do not come from a service background.
Okay, that's understandable. Following up again on the whole museum, electric carts, handicap, you want to address how that's handled for people that need a little extra assistance?
There are wheelchairs available to borrow on site if you'd like to use them. You just go to the welcome desk and they will help get you settled. And
is the signage adequate off the parkway so folks will be able to find it easily?
So when we were open in November, there was actually a large road sign that said museum this way, turn left or right. So I'm hoping that will come back as well. But I do know that there were plans to make more signage available.
And is there an exhibit on germ warfare or biological warfare?
Like just dedicated to germ warfare? I can't recall. I do know that every exhibit has something on medical innovations and technologies, and that most of those relate to the common illnesses, diseases, and injuries that soldiers received. So I'm sure it would be present somewhere in there, but I cannot confirm if there's one dedicated just to germ warfare.
Maybe that one you showed at the end dealing with the medical, or might have some opportunities there to expand your knowledge.
On my lunch, I try to walk through the exhibits and I'm still not finished.
Well, I'm sure you're busy with a lot of other things. All right. I also want to ask about the foundation. I understand there are opportunities there to interact with the foundation and something outside with bricks or something where you can dedicate a brick to someone who was in the service?
There's lots of ways to dedicate something, donate something at the museum. We have bricks that line the pathway leading to the museum, and we're still selling bricks because we're also creating a plaza, Memorial Plaza, and a garden out front in that large Warrior Field area as you enter the museum. So there's still ongoing projects. We're also selling, I'd have to check all the things that are available, but you can also provide tribute donations via the Army Historical Foundation website or the museum's website, because it's the same portal. And let's see, we did sell trees. I think more trees would be available, and they get their own granite marker. But all of those items you can find out on the foundation's website, which is armyhistory.org. And there's a little donate tab where you can find out more about that information.
All right, that's very helpful for people. Could you verify again that there is no admission fee? And I don't know if you reviewed the hours where the museum is open.
The museum is totally free, so everyone come, and it's open from 9 to 5.
And that's 7 days a week?
Every day. The only day we will not be open is Christmas Day.
All right, well, that's understandable. All right, so let me see if there's any more questions I overlooked here. I don't know if any more questions have come through. Do you have any things that you'd like to leave with us, Kathleen? Any food for thought?
If there are any questions or questions I could not answer, as I am sorry, not in the exhibit department, you can go on the website and submit questions and contact our customer service.
Oh, that's a great idea. Thank you.
I'll put you in touch with the person who can hopefully answer that question a lot better than I can.
Well, I'm sure that you have done an admirable job helping us navigate this new museum. It's a huge asset to Fairfax County and our whole array of museums here. And no doubt we hope to see you in the museum at some point.
I'll be in the Army Action Center most of the time.
All right. Thank you again on behalf of Encore Learning, all of our participants, Special Events Committee, for your time and energy sharing info about our museum.
Thank you so much. We hope to see you.
Absolutely.